Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to Truth Warrior. Hope you are happy and well as best as possible given these extraordinary times wherever you are in the world. Glad you're here. Going to be continuing on with this series that I've been working on for the last few months. If you've been following my show, I'm going to give you a list of some of the key presentations that I've been doing as I've been kind of revisiting all of my old research and putting it all together with some of my new research to try to get to the bottom of how everything has gotten to the level of decay and corruption and tyranny and insanity that it has. And of course, I'm broadcasting here from British Columbia, Canada. And it is Wednesday, December 3rd, 2025. And today we are talking about a book that I've been going through meticulously. And I've just done 20 slides from the book. And I'm going to do this in sections. The book has so many gems in it. It's so crucial. And the more I'm going through it, I'm realizing how crucial this book, in particular, this subject is. Looking at the Fabian Socialist history, the Fabian Socialist contribution to the communist advance. That's the name of the book we're going to be going through. It's by an author from Australia, Eric Butler. It was written in the 60s, and it was cited in my blue book that we are also going to continue to go through. I call this my blue book. This is basically a photocopied book that we went through in the last show, talking about New World Order corruption in Canada. It was written by a bunch of Canadian university professors, researchers, and contributing authors back in the early 90s. And they started citing this book that we're going to go through. I did the intro of the book last episode, and the last episode is crucial, especially if you live in Canada, but it's valuable to anybody watching from any country in the world, particularly if you live in the West, because of the fact that this was an advance that was done to all the Western countries simultaneously at a certain point in history. This particular advance that was initiated by what I call the high table, the elite power brokers, the cultists, the dark occultists, however you want to call them, the Illuminati. They had an agenda going back about 200 years or more for central world authority, the world government. And there was a series of attacks that needed to take place in order for that to happen. Attacks on free nations and the minds of all the people living in those nations. And so this is what we call the advance that was done, the march through the institutions, as it were, taking over the government, or at least the key decision-making positions, the government, the media, the education system, the courts, on and on we can go. And so if you're wandering around today in your country, and let's say I'm in Canada, or you're in Canada, or a country like that, US, Australia, and you're wondering how everything got so insane, and it's in seemingly a short period of time. It seems like this just sort of came out of nowhere, or at least that's how people are experiencing it. But it really didn't come out of nowhere. And that's what I'm here to tell you. I feel like my role, my job, my contribution is to continue the legacy of the people that I learned from, that I look up to, who are always trying to bring you back to the big picture, not to just tunnel vision on these little battles and issues that are eating away at our society, causing division and stimulating government programs and policies and bills and laws that are slowly eroding away our constitutions, our liberties, our rights, our freedoms, and our prosperity. And so we've basically been captured by a bunch of pirates, a gang of pirates that are not from some low level tier. They are the elite of the elite, and they have been working on this agenda for world domination and control of all the land, the resources, and the wealth for some time. They've written about it openly. They believe they are operating for some sort of benefit, or at least this is the sales pitch that's often given with this. They're operating off of the noble vision of creating a world utopia that's going to better benefit the earth and the inhabitants living on it. Of course, though, with the caveat that it has to be under their central authority and dictatorship. So these are the divine rights. These are the vicars. These are the shining ones that look at themselves like Olympian gods from the Greek myths. They look at themselves as being the caretakers of humanity, the authority over humanity, and they have particular ideologies that they have found work very well in order to facilitate that goal and that dream of essentially world power and dominion. And so we have to look at this in pieces in order to understand that theory and how we go from just how did things get so corrupt and backwards and insane in a country like Canada or in the US or in any of these other countries. How did that happen? Well, if you're only looking at coincidental views of history, if you're only looking at surface a surface layer view of world events that have led us to this point, or certain government regimes that have taken over the years and started to install various policies that have been selling out our land and resources for some time to these unelected bureaucracies like the United Nations, the EU, the trilateral commissions, the Bilderberg groups, and all these different roundtable groups. We covered that whole history in an episode in this series where I got into the work of G. Edward Griffin. We talked about the Milner Group, the Rhodes Trust, the Rhodes Roundtable, basically the Rhodes Roundtable playbook, the blueprint of how that works. And then we compared that to actual government policies and the pushing of all of these different laws and whatnot that are slowly eroding away our countries and selling off the land and resources to who knows, right? There's an origin to this. There's a history to this. It didn't just happen out of nowhere. It's just that we're paying attention now because it's coming into our personal lives more and more. It's basically crossing a threshold of our homes. It's invading our income streams. It's changing drastically our culture, our way of life, the premise, the values that we hold here in the West, etc. The number one being freedom and sovereignty, which was basically the target of groups like this Fabian Society we're going to get into, and the low-level henchmen that they have used to help advance their agenda. And so that's a whole story that you need to get into. But oh, someone says I found it in PDF. You know what? Let me drop the PDF in there for you. I should give it to you guys right now so you can have this as a resource and read along and do your own study. There's nothing like reading it for yourself. So let me just make sure I get that all set up for you guys as we're rolling here. But yeah, here it is. Here it is, guys. So I'm going to put that in for you. Hopefully you guys can see that. Throw it over on Rumble. How's everybody doing on Rumble? Welcome, welcome. How's everybody doing on X? Shout out to everybody jumping in here. We are doing this live, so if you're listening to the recording of this, that's why there's all this live discussion here. And so I want to get through reading this book to you guys, or reading sections of this book. And I want you to think about, as I'm going through this, how familiar this is going to sound to you. It's unbelievable to me. Like I was putting this together again, and I'm like, oh my God. There have been people that have figured this out, and they don't have a crystal ball. What they have is access to the actual statements, the documentation, the declassified information that has been gained through FOIA requests over the years, the research of other titans in this field that have risked their careers and their lives to share this information. They've done it well back. We're talking, when was this book written? This was written in the 60s, I believe. I don't have the date right up here, but yeah, it's an older book, and I just can't believe how accurate it is. And if we can learn the big picture, we can see our way out of this situation. There is solutions to this, and that's how you have to think about this research. Just for anybody that's sick and tired of being told there's no hope and it's just, this is so big and powerful and you feel powerless. I want you to know that the feeling of powerlessness is a tactic of demoralization, right? The Yuri Bezmenov formula of how this advance works, how this infiltration works, is to demoralize a nation so that they don't fight back. Okay, it's necessary. This is how bullies work. That's what bullying is. It's a demoralization tactic so that you don't fight back. And so the bully can just do whatever they want and control you through that fear. And so I'm urging you, as hopeless as it seems sometimes, and trust me, I have my days as well. You have to never give your enemy that much credit. You got to give them the respect they're due, because we're not dealing with some amateurs here. We're dealing with high towering intellects who are very cunning and know exactly what the F they are doing. They have been at this for generations, and they have access to archives of information about the human psyche, about the nature of reality, about a lot of things that you and I won't have ready access to. They've collected this information for hundreds, if not thousands of years, as they've seen how empires rise and fall, who were the best power brokers in history, the best mafia dons, the best world leaders, who were the best ones out there. This is their study, the elites, the controllers. They're studying the other controllers, you know, the Caesars, the pharaohs, the kings, the rulers, the clerics, the priesthoods, the tribal leaders, whatever they can do. They're looking for what's the best way to control the mind of the population that is the target population, for bringing them into our ring of power. There's a whole history of that you and I won't study. This whole Machiavellian history, there's a whole history to that is known in these circles. They reference it all the time. They do tongue-in-cheek hints at it through symbolism, through the words they use. And if you know what you're looking at and you pay attention, you can hear that exact rhetoric coming out of the mouths of your politicians, coming out of the mouths of your, quote, media journalists, which are just activists that are paid to basically read scripts. And you'll hear it from your university professors. You'll hear it because they can't help themselves. These are ideologies that are baked into the pie now. And there are people who are true believers. There are people who are blackmailed and or paid off. They're corrupted or compromised in some way. There are people who are the high-flying psychopaths that know all of this is a bunch of bollocks, all the sales pitch they're telling you to get you to give over the keys to your kingdom. They know it's a bunch of bollocks. I'm talking that level at the top, at the upper ring. And yet they continue on because there is an ulterior agenda here. That is the claim. That is the claim from me and from these authors, is that this is not about brotherhood, utopia, pie in the sky, ponies and rainbows, kumbaya. That is a big load of shite. And that what this is about is power. That's the religion. That's the cult. That's the hallmark. That's the aim. That's the agenda. Very simple, not complicated at all. All we need to do is figure out what the complexities are about how you would achieve that if that was your aim, and then look at history, our present situation from a lens like this, a big perspective like this, and say, hey, if we had a theory of how you would take over the world, let's get that sussed out and then look to see what the statements have been made by these individuals and these organizations, these secret societies, these Fabian networks, what they actually said they wanted to do with the world, and then see if that's what's happened in the world. This is also not rocket science. This is just observation of, okay, human beings are out there saying things. Let's see if they're doing the things they're saying. So your job isn't super hard now. It used to be a lot harder to procure this information. It's not as hard anymore. When we get into this book written by Eric Butler, he had a heck of a time to get this information in his day, in the 60s. Okay. You now have access to his book and all the other books and all the UN documents and all the bills that are going through your parliament right now as I speak. You can now put the pieces together. You have that ability. The experts, the university professors, all these guys, they're going to try to territorialize this and say, you little man, you don't have the qualifications to stand up against the might of the academic world. How dare you go behind our back and start researching behind our doors? Like, we're supposed to give you the blessing on what truth is, right? Now, I'm on a bit of a nuanced position on that to a certain extent, where I do accept that we do need experts in the world. Like, when no one person can hold the necessary expertise to keep all of civilization running all in one head. Okay. So we do need to compare and contrast with experts. But my question is always, which experts are we talking to? The people I'm going to read from and have been reading from are experts and also insiders. If you're an insider, like a Carol Quigley, professor at Georgetown University, or going all the way back to the 1700s, where you're a member of the Scottish Royal Society, John Robeson, and you want to write about an Illuminati group that's been exposed in Bavaria, in which the Bavarian government has public records and you can go and look it up anytime you want. We're not talking about making shit up on this show. That's not what my job is. There's plenty of shows that do make a lot of shit up in this sort of conspiracy research field. There's been a lot of hogwash put out there about the subjects we're covering. To stay true, to know if what you're doing is correct and accurate, or at least, like I say always, it's at least worthy of investigation. Like, we can validate it to the point where the theory we're presenting here, you tell me, is it worth investigating if we have open statements from people from different generations that all lead to something, and then see if those statements are vindicated as being empty or not, by way of looking at what happened since they made those statements? Did any of those things come to fruition? Are any of those things happening right now? So that's how we got to look at this, guys. And I just want to quickly give you some titles of the shows that you should look to if you're trying to catch up. I started this series with a show back in September called Fascism: An Actual Definition. I want you to go and check that out. That would be ground zero, because of all this stuff. Everybody's calling everybody fascists and they have no idea in the world what they're talking about. We've even got people saying, I am a fascist because fascism is the solution to the totalitarians. I'm like, oh my God, we really got to rewind the tape and do some research. So I went in and did that definition on fascism. The next show after that is The Occult Roots of Totalitarianism. This is where I get into the occult, meaning hidden, secret society element to the movements, the political movements, the revolutionary movements that have been happening since, say, the French Revolution onwards. Okay. We can even go a little bit further back. I did a part 2 to that. That whole series, The Occult Roots of Totalitarianism, ends up being about 7 hours. It's quite deep, but it's super relevant and important. Then the next one would be None Dare Call It an Occult Conspiracy. That's where I get into John Robeson's work specifically. That's a really good one. And then the one I really love is the Freeland Rhodes New World Order Connection Explained. I did this show off the back of Chrystia Freeland, former Deputy Prime Minister of Canada, Finance Minister of Canada, who was promoted up the ranks out of the political office and into the basically stewardship and the CEO position of the Rhodes Trust, which was really interesting. So we pulled open the history of the Rhodes Roundtable groups. We got into G. Edward Griffin. I think it was a really well done presentation there. I got lots of good feedback. Thank you to everybody. And then the most recent show is A History of New World Order Corruption in Canada. That's going to be a part 1. We're going to keep going back into that blue book that I got that goes through different aspects of this. And so this show today is just a little segue from that one, but it's all relevant. And we're getting into the Fabian Socialist contribution to the communist advance. And when you hear communist advance, the communists' ideology was baked in the Philadelphian Lodge, was the origin of the French Revolution. And it started what James Billington called the fire in the minds of men. And it was basically a perfect pie baked by the best of the best as to how to capture basically the lower and middle classes. That's what that one was designed for. They basically designed a total totalitarian system that would get the public of the general public population of these countries to actually cheer on and support a centralized government, a centralized bank, and basically a centralized dictatorship in their country. But of course, they would have to sell that differently in different demographics, because it just turns out we're not all the same. All these different cultures and countries and peoples, We all think a little differently. We all have a different history. We have a genetic memory. We have a race memory. We have a cultural memory. So you can't just use the same formula on all of the world. That's a pretty cartoonish way of looking at it. If you're going to be really practical about it, and this is what you read in these Fabian treaties, is that what you need to do is you need something specially tailored towards targeted populations. It's always the same poison package at the base, but the sales pitch, the implementation, slight changes here and there are what makes it into sort of like a hybrid, but it's all the same, and it's the same origin, and it's the same occult knowledge that's being plundered and then repackaged into political systems. And so that's how I see all these different isms, is they're just flavors of the same poison pill that were sold to different demographics, different classes, different types of people, but it was all the same package. And the goal, because that's what you would have to do if you wanted to bring everybody into one ring of power to rule the whole world. You got a whole world of different people, different cultures, different ways of thinking that have all grown up in different environments. Okay, so look at it like different like lab rat environments. You know, these scientists, they take these lab rats or these pigeons or these different animals, and they run various experiments on them. And they'll take one group of rats and raise them in a particular environment that has a maze in it or has different electrical signals or charges or whatever they're going to do, right? And then they take another group of rats and they raise them in a different environment with different triggers. And then they do side-by-side comparisons, and they see, oh, the behavior is a little bit different in that group because we changed the environment over here like this, and the behavior is different over here. They've done this with monkeys. They've done this with basically all living organisms, which is really interesting to me as to how dedicated the research has been to try to nail this down. Okay. So super important to understand that. And so what's happened, and you're going to see Eric Butler get into this, is that there's been a lot of confusion about how the Fabians play in with the communists, because again, there seems to be a little bit of a battle that happens at certain points in history between the Fabian socialists and the communists, just as there was seemingly a battle on the surface between the Nazis or the fascists and the communists. And just like there seems to be on the surface a battle between Nazis, fascists, communists, Fabian socialists, and then just socialists, right? Or democratic socialists. And like the word keeps creeping in, the ultimate collectivistic word gets baked in under different names. And it looks like on the surface, all these different groups are fighting with each other, when all that is there's different lab rats raised in different environments, introduced to different triggers and different impulses and different environmental changes that then shape their psychology and their biology. And then you got a different one over here and a different one over there. And then what happens when you let those rats out of the cages? They're all, they're different types of creatures. So there's going to be a natural little hierarchy battle that's going to take place, right? And of course, the big movers and shakers at the top that are doing these experiments, or at least converting even organic events that happen in history into experimental data gathering events, that they can then take that information and go, guys, we finally baked the perfect blueberry pie here. We finally have the best solution for the world, but we made sure that it's not really just to help the world. It's actually more to help our interests of gaining central power and control. So there it is in a nutshell, but let me go through the details with you, and we'll just make sure everything's running smooth. Okay, we're good to go. For a second, I was worried I wasn't streaming on Rumble, but I am. Okay, so let's do this, guys. We got some reading. Here it is. Here it is. Let's get right into it. The book, The Fabian Socialist Contribution to the Communist Advance. It's written by Eric D. Butler. It is an Australian League of Rights publication. There was a group called the Australian League of Rights. There was a similar one in Canada, by the way. And I look at myself as like a brother country to the Australians, because we are also a vassal state of the British Crown Corporation, as they are. And so there's an interesting, if you talk to some of the Australian researchers that have gotten into this, they're going to give you very similar conclusions to their research as you'll find with the Canadian ones, because it's very similar way that we're basically the same lab rat experiment. Okay. So here's a little quote he has from Professor Harold Lasky, who was a Fabian socialist theoretician, and this appeared in his appreciation of the Communist Manifesto for the Labor Party in 1948. I mean, the title just gives it away, that they were very favorable towards the communists. So Lasky says this: who, remembering that these policies of high taxation and centralization of credit were the demands of the manifesto issued by Marx and Engels in 1848, who can doubt our common inspiration? He's speaking to the Fabians, and he's saying, who can doubt our common inspiration, meaning us, the Fabians, and they, the communists? So here it is. The great Lord Acton, famous for his observation that all power tends to corrupt, also made the penetrating statement that few discoveries are more irritating than those which expose the pedigree of ideas. The purpose of this study is to trace the pedigree and the development of the ideas which have produced the Fabian socialist movement as one of the principal contributions to the mounting forces of a worldwide revolution threatening the basic foundations of Western and Christian civilization. The very suggestion that the Fabian socialist movement has played a vital role in furthering the communist advance, still less has had any close connection with communism, will naturally be regarded with great indignation by all those who have uncritically accepted the widespread view that the Fabians have been a, quote, moderate influence in politics and economics. And the very fact that the Fabians and other socialist groups have been attacked by the Marxist-Leninists is offered as sufficiently convincing evidence that so far from moderate socialists assisting the communist advance, they are in fact the really only barrier to communism. So he's saying the general impression is almost like the Fabian socialists are somehow fighting the communists. But as one of the famous architects of the British welfare state, Sir William Beveridge, said, his program was one of going halfway to Moscow. So his program of welfare state was, we're just going to go halfway to basically full-blown communism. Beveridge was a leading Fabian. His description of socialism is a realistic one, an admission that it is moving in the same direction as the Marxists, only not as fast, and as many sincere socialists believe, not as far. Sadly, they're wrong. You must look beyond the labels. I've always been saying that. Look beyond the surface. It cannot be stressed too often that those who are going to make an effective contribution to the struggle against the communist challenge. Here, let me just bring this to, I think I can read it like that. To the struggle, let's do this again. It cannot be stressed too often that those who are going to make an effective contribution to the struggle against the communist challenge must always look beyond political labels, propaganda, smokescreens, and mere verbal battles to the reality behind them. And what is the basic reality shared by all brands of socialists? Here it is. They all believe in the centralization of power. They all advance the idea that the power of government should be increased. So there's your common, the basic level. That's the common element that you're going to find at the base of all these different variations of what we call collectivism, okay? Which is the idea that you as an individual do not have rights, do not have freedoms unless the crowd, the group, the population allows you to have it. So it's just a complete flip as opposed to the premise of Western civilization, which was not based on collectivism. It was based on the rights of the individual as the primary. And then that would then filter into how this distributes throughout the society. Okay, so just get this straight. If you're talking to people and they start going on all these tangents, you just slow them down and go, hold on a minute. Here is the central poison pill that I am personally against, and I'll give you the reasons why. That all these ideologies believe in the centralization of power. They all advance the idea that the power of government should be increased. Government is not God. They want you to believe it can be. But government is made up of what? People, human beings. Okay? And then when you find out that those people and human beings that make up your government, that's only the public display of your government. Behind those front men and women are the power players, the shadow hand, the black hand, the people behind them. That's how all these dictatorships are run. All these socialist governments, We got puppets out front. We got a bunch of witches and warlocks behind the curtain. Okay. These are the common things. So he continues. Some socialists and many who call themselves anti-socialists genuinely believe, of course, that it is possible to implement a policy of centralized control and centralized planning and then successfully call a halt at certain stage. They are like the girl who argued that just a little bit of pregnancy was all right. It's a good analogy. Unfortunately, history has proved that once policies of centralized control are set in motion, they progressively gain momentum, and that as the momentum grows, the moderates responsible for the initial impetus either have to become more ruthless in order to attempt to deal with the results of the increased momentum, or they are pushed aside by those who have no scruples about being ruthless in the exercising of centralized power. Again, this is all, guys, going to be very logical and very simple for anybody to understand. Think about it. Even if you have some well-meaning people that believe they drank the Kool-Aid and they believe socialism and collectivism and centralization of power are the recipe for success for humanity, okay? And they just have that belief. Like their intentions are pure. They just want to see a better world. They want everybody to get along. They want everybody to live equal, all these things they talk about. And they're well-meaning, okay? Let's say those are the people that bring in the central power system into your government. Do you think those kinds of bleeding heart types are capable of warding off primary psychopaths who don't give a flying fuck? Do you think they're equipped psychologically, physically, emotionally to actually stop the dark ones from gaining the positions that they just created? If you believe that, there's a level of naivety that you may need to address as a person like that. It just, and you need to look at history to, and not even just the history of where it went bad with all these central control systems being plugged in everywhere. Not just that history. You need to also get into that history of cults that I've been rolling out for some time now, because it's just, those are just smaller experiments than the bigger experiments of the big nationwide cults that are created all the time. So just, he's getting you to think about this. We're not even having to ascribe malice to everybody's intentions in order to understand how this goes so bad so quickly. If you create a system that allows bacteria to get in, or a virus to get in, or whatever to get in, a poison to get in, you can expect that now they're going to spend the rest of your life fighting that poison from getting in. But maybe you don't need to build a system that is so open for attack, right? That was the argument of the original Western system, was to say, guys, we don't need to go collectivism. And we can still have charity. We can still have all these different things that we're all looking for, but we can also keep freedom. See, that's the difference. You have to give up a lot of things that we all take for granted today, that our forefathers fought, died, and bled for, in order to install any sort of centralized power in the government. I don't care if they mean well or if they're just there for power. It doesn't matter. Any type of centralized system is open immediately for attack. And then when you find out that the entire ideology was written by the people who intended on using it for exactly that purpose. That's what I'm trying to tell you. They know it. They are like, this is perfect PR. This socialist script, this communist script, this fascist script, this Nazi script, whatever script they want. They know it's going to have power on your mind. They know, they also layer it with lots of truths, because they know human consciousness won't attach to it unless it's mostly true. They just got to poison 20% of it in order to make it what they want. But the 80% that might be true, or might be based in, some kind of higher ideal or some kind of virtue that, they're preying upon. This is how manipulators work, right? Do you honestly think that the political system is somehow immune from this? It's one of the number one centers of corruption ever. Look around, guys, right? I know I'm talking to you guys. I'm talking to the newbies when I say that. I know you guys know, but anyways, I just think that's an interesting way for him to open up. He's opening up soft. Okay. We'll get to it as we go. We'll get a little deeper here. He continues, every increase, this is huge, every increase in the power of government is at the expense of the individual. Let me read you that again. Every increase, every single one in the power of government is at the expense of the individual. Do you guys understand this? It's not a one-to-one win-win. It's not like, well, some things, this is the argument you're always going to get. Well, some things can be like that. If we give the government a lot of power, like way too much power in finance, in regulating the economy, then that's just going to help the little guy, isn't it? Has it? Have we eliminated poverty? Well, all the socialist doctrines of all the world, have we eliminated all the homeless people? Not eliminated, not eliminated them. You know what I mean? Like, have we eliminated that from our society and we've raised everybody up? Like, has it worked? How's your grocery prices right now? How's your gas prices? How's your paycheck? How's your income? You're working your ass off. You're trying to do all the things. You were jump through all the hoops you were told you have to jump through. You're just trying to get by in life. How's the quality of life living under more centralized government rather than maybe less if you speak to your great grandparents? It's probably how far back you're going to have to go. Totally different ball. It's a universe of difference, right? So just hope we really nail that. Remember this. If you forget everything else, remember this. Every increase in the power of government is at the expense of the individual, you, me, your child, who, as he loses not only power to make decisions for himself, but also loses his sense of personal responsibility, tends to become more and more satisfied to depend upon the state. This is how they create slaves, mental slaves. They get you dependent on them, and now they own you. It is the undermining of the individual's belief in the basic principle of true freedom and the personal responsibility that goes with it that has such a deadly softening up effect on the peoples of the non-communist world, and thus seriously lowered their resistance to the communist challenge. The Fabian Socialists have not only made a major contribution towards this weakened resistance, they have provided a smokescreen which has hidden the activities of both secret and known communists. In a secret message sent from London to the Internationale in Geneva in 1870, Karl Marx said that the English would never make their own revolution and that foreigners would have to make it for them. Guys, are you listening to this? Are you starting to understand the migration plan a little bit? The mass unvetted migration from all over the world? Let's do that again in case you missed it. In a secret message from London to the Internationale in Geneva, Switzerland in 1870, Karl Marx said that the English, the British, would never make their own revolution and that foreigners would have to make it for them, meaning a revolution to install the central government. They knew the Brits would never go for it. But if we can get a bunch of foreigners in there that would, who come from those types of incubated lab rat experiments in their socialist countries, then we can get them to start the revolution in Britain. What's happening right now? He continues, but there are not only violent revolutionary activities, there is such a thing as a silent revolution. This is where my ears perk up. The undermining of a nation and its institutions from within. This is what the Fabian Socialists set out to accomplish. Their policy was one of influencing all other political groups by infiltration and permeation. This policy has been aptly described as one of Sovietism by stealth. The Fabian Society, which took its name from Fabius Cunitator, the Roman dictator who eventually defeated Hannibal as a result of a policy of gradualness. Gradualness. Look that up. That is a term used so much by these guys. Was launched in the winter of 1883-84 under the leadership of Professor Thomas Davison, an ethical anarchist communist. He was soon superseded by the Webbs and George Bernard Shaw, who played a dominant role in the society for nearly half a century. The policy of permeation soon started to bear fruit. Politicians of all parties were influenced. George Bernard Shaw has frankly described this policy. He says, "Our propaganda is one of permeating. We urged our members to join the liberal and radical associations in their district, or if they preferred it, the conservative associations." Listen up, Canada. "We permeated the party organizations and pulled all the strings we could lay our hands on with the utmost adroitness and energy. And we succeeded so well that in 1888 we gained the solid advantage of a progressive majority full of ideas that would never come into their heads had not the Fabians put them there." I mean, the more you read the actual founding fathers of these ideologies, the more you're going to get open admissions about everything we're talking about here. It's pretty shocking how dead on it is, and how blatant they just come out and say it. The essence of the Fabians' Soviet by stealth program was to exploit the natural tendency of all politicians, irrespective of label, doesn't matter what party, to concentrate power. That's their mission. The Fabians set about influencing all politicians to support legislation, which would so start centralizing power that a process of delegation of power to a bureaucracy would become inevitable. Once the bureaucracy was empowered to make regulations and decrees having the force of law, responsible parliamentary government would be undermined and the traditional constitutional safeguards of the individual's rights destroyed. I would put it to you, this is exactly what happened to Canada. Exactly. In other words, they set out deliberately to pervert the parliamentary system. Now, the Fabians were the ones that set it out. One of the great figures of the Fabian socialist movement, Professor Harold Lasky, clearly outlined the Fabian technique in the Fabian journal New Statesman in September 10th, 1930 something. It's scribbled out, the 1930s. It's as follows, quote, "The necessity and value of delegated legislation and its extension is inevitable if the process of socialization is not to be wrecked by the normal methods of obstruction which existing parliamentary procedure sanctions." Meaning, there's protective measures in your parliamentary system at its origins that were there to be a bulwark and be a wall against a socialist or centralized government system coming in. And so that it was imperative that they slowly remove all the protections that previously would have protected your parliament and your government from being infiltrated by Fabians. Did you hear that? We got to pull all the security detail so that we can access our target. In his book, Democracy in Crisis, Lasky said that the first task of a socialist government would be to, quote, "take vast powers and legislate under them by ordinance and decree." It is significant that in recent times, the communists have admitted the possibilities of using the parliamentary system to further their program. So obviously, the communists have said it. They never shut up about it. But we're like, oh, the Fabians also? So you got these two different variations of the same poison soup that are both using the exact same modus operandi? Whoa. Pinch me, man. Is that possible? The Fabian technique of perverting the parliamentary system to destroy responsible government was warned against by the famous former Lord Chief Justice of England, Lord Hewart, in his great classic, The New Despotism from 1929. Lord Hewart made the following serious charge, quote, "A mass of evidence establishes the fact that there is in existence a persistent and well-contrived system intending to produce and in practice producing a despotic power which at one time and the same time places government departments beyond the sovereignty of Parliament and beyond the jurisdiction of the courts." So we're sitting in Canada wondering, how's our government getting away with violating what we all thought was law in Canada? How are they getting the courts to go along with all of these different things? How are they getting parliament on both sides of the aisle to allow these globalist bills and roundtable bills to get put in one after the other that are all dressed up as stopping climate change or helping build equality over here or helping some transgender program in Ethiopia or whatever, all these different things that are going on, and the average person has no idea that these are all just different payload packages to get to the central government. And you got to use the system against them. And if you want to have a despotic power put in place, you need the government departments captured. You need the parliament system captured. Like, this isn't hard to understand. This is how the mafia moved in New York once upon a day, right? Did you think they're the only ones? The Second World War, which the Marxist-Leninists claimed was necessary to advance their revolutionary strategy for world conquest, not only resulted in a major expansion of the communist empire, it also gave the Fabian Socialists the opportunity of expanding bureaucracy in every part of the English-speaking world, including the USA. This expansion of bureaucracy, which enables the Fabians and other planners to exercise growing power over all aspects of the life of the individual by holding key bureaucratic positions, also provides the communists with a perfect cover for their contribution to the revolution. It's a nice little Bonnie and Clyde. The New Deal program, which President Roosevelt set in motion in 1933, allegedly to deal with the Great Depression crisis, was in fact Fabian inspired. With influential Fabians on both sides of the Atlantic being directly involved in the program. Do you remember when I've done this so many times on various shows? We get into Professor Anthony Sutton, member of the Hoover Institute, comes out, writes a whole series of books on Wall Street and the rise of Hitler, Wall Street and the rise of Bolsheviks, Wall Street and the rise of FDR. He found the receipts of how all three versions of those socialisms, Soviet socialism, Nazi socialism, American socialism, were all financed by the same cats in England and America and Switzerland. And is that a shock? And now we've got a separate source vindicating that same theme of saying, well, President Roosevelt with the New Deal program, the New Deal being the inspiration for AOC's Green New Deal, which was the climate version of the same socialism that was introduced later. And she even admits very openly that her inspiration was FDR, because FDR is like the number one demigod of the Democrat Party in America. The New Deal program was brought in by the Fabian Socialists, actually. It's just that Roosevelt was their tool to do it. Okay? The New Deal required a tremendous expansion of bureaucracy. And this bureaucracy provided the perfect protection for large numbers of top communist agents who progressively worked their way right into the very heart of the Roosevelt administration, which from 1938 onwards was practically controlled by communists. This is the formation of the deep state. This is the birth. Now, it's important to note that while the greatest rate of expansion takes place when there is a government openly committed to increased government planning, the expansion of bureaucracy has also continued under professed anti-socialist governments. These governments are also subject to the influence of the Fabians. So this is how you're going to understand the connective tissue between what looks like the far left and what looks like the far right. It's the two different gloves worn by the same person, okay? These governments are also subject to the influence of the Fabians, particularly in the field of economic and financial policy. They must continue to move, however reluctantly, in the same direction as the socialists until such time as they are prepared to implement economic and financial policies which are designed to place the full benefit of the free enterprise and private ownership economy at the disposal of the individual. That's how it's supposed to be. Such policies would require less government and a substantial reduction in bureaucracy. So, which way, Western man? Which way? More bureaucracy and bigger government or less? Do you want to actually receive the fruits of your labor? Or do you want every hand in your pocket for the rest of your days to be a slave and to get these cats benefiting from your enslavement? Which way do you want to go? That's the question of the age. Now, these planners are dedicated to building bigger and bigger bureaucracies to control and run the highly centralized economy they are progressively creating with their communistic policies of high taxation and centralized control of credit. So that's your hallmark: high taxation, centralized control of credit. All the commies today that are like, look at it, capitalism failed. It's like, yeah, but you're not operating with capitalism. You're operating with Fabian socialist infiltration as far back as the 1930s that have slowly been eroding and creating bigger bureaucracies, which means they're using socialism to come in and destroy capitalism. So you're fighting a straw man by pointing at the current Rockefeller crony capitalist economy that we have and calling that the enemy of your ideology. We're living in your ideology. The only reason it isn't gone full-blown Mad Max is because there's still a semblance of capitalism and free market that has survived. Once that's gone, which is the plan in this great reset where you'll own nothing and be happy, then you'll understand. But by then it'll be too late. And then for the communists out there, you'll be the ones lined up and imprisoned and worse by these guys. It's just how it always goes. It's just never forget the history of revolutions. The revolutionaries, they're the ones lined up and shot by the real regime once the psychopaths take over the centralized form of government that you helped create. This has been repeated endlessly. It's documented. It's irrefutable. So please stop sending me that bullshit argument. Next, large numbers, not essential. Like Lenin, the genius who fashioned a practical program by which he said the Marxists could achieve world conquest, the Fabians never regarded numbers as a major importance. A dedicated minority with its members in key positions in society could influence and eventually control the great majority. This is why secret societies were necessary. They were used to do exactly this. And this is why they were successful. You don't need everybody. You just need a bunch of Kool-Aid drinkers and useful idiots surrounding you. And then you need a bunch of key decision makers in the right positions. It's all you need. You can take over anything you want. Most humans will let the wolves right in. Please come on in, have a seat, wolf. Can I get you anything? Wolf's like, yeah, you? That's most people. A dedicated minority with its members in key positions in society could influence and eventually control the great majority. In his Socialism in England, published in 1889, only 4 years after the Fabian Society had been established, Sidney Webb pointed out that, quote, the Fabian Society occupies a different sphere as a socialist society from that of the two larger bodies. It includes members of all the other organizations, with a number of active workers, chiefly of the middle class and literary proletariat. The society exercises a considerable influence, more than any apparent, by the personal participation of its members in nearly all reform movements, as well as their work at the universities and in the fields of journalism and the teaching of political economy. So all your political scientists. It is not, however, a numerous body and makes no attempt to increase its numbers beyond a convenient limit. So you don't need everybody to make a political conspiracy, turns out. You just need the right guys in the right places at the right time, pre-programmed with the right ideology. Now, Margaret Cole, leading Fabian socialist, reveals in her book on Sidney Webb's wife, Beatrice, that there were only 40 in the Fabian Society in its early years. But, Mrs. Cole continued, the 40 members and those who joined them within the next year or two contained a very high proportion of people who combined remarkable intellectual ability with a strong sense of practical possibilities. This is also the same modus operandi of that Rhodes Roundtable system. It's almost like they were reading from the same script. The revelation that the Fabian Society started with such a few members and concentrated on quality and permeation rather than on numbers recalls the fact that Lenin only had 17 supporters when he launched his Bolshevik movement in 1903. It is significant that Bernard Shaw said in 1931 that, quote, Lenin owned a great deal of his eminence to the fact that in his younger days he studied the works of Sidney Webb, who was founder of the Fabian Society. Shaw went on in the same statement to say that, quote, the success of the Russian experiment means that old words like Fabianism and socialism are all out of date. We're rejecting the old word, we're bringing in the new term now, the one that is more appealing to the masses. Shaw made his positions much clearer when he said in 1948, as reported in the Evening Herald in Dublin of February 3rd, 1948, that, quote, I am a communist, but not a member of the Communist Party. Stalin is a first-rate Fabian. I am one of the founders of Fabianism, and as such, very friendly to Russia. Are you noticing a cozy relationship forming here? Is anybody surprised? Unlike the genuine moderates who sincerely believed that Fabian socialism would mean only a limited amount of central planning, Shaw was a realist who realized that the inevitable end result of such a policy must be economic conscription of some kind. In the October 1921 issue of the English Labour Monthly, Shaw wrote that, quote, compulsory labor with death as the final penalty is the keystone of socialism. Because, guys, as Mises pointed out, they have a problem with motivation of the slaves. They have this little problem. It seems to be that there's an incentive structure for a reason, and that you need incentive in your society for people to do very hard physical labor for you. They're not just going to love their neighbors and have all this altruism, equality. That all just sounds good when you're at a rally and you're cheering for the slogans. But when it comes to implementing it, every single human being walking, no matter all the virtue signaling and playing pretend that they can possibly conjure up, it turns out that when the rubber hits the road, nobody wants to fucking work. And they don't want to work for free. And that's why the joke of the Soviet Union was literally, we pretend to work, they pretend to pay us. Just a lovely situation. And then you swing over to Atlas Shrugged from Ayn Rand, and you read the chapter on the railroad. There's she does an analogy of the railroad and compares it to the forming of the Soviet Union. It's life-changing because it gets into not just the system and the data of the history. It gets into the psychology of what happens psychologically to a population that operates off of this base principle. And it just tears the fabric of society apart because it's in opposition to human nature. That's why. And that's why you need re-education camps. That's why you need coercion. That's why you need force to force this square peg into this round hole that they've been trying to do for hundreds of not thousands of years. Okay? So that's the problem, is that compulsory labor with death as the final penalty. Basically, they had to go to a point, this is what Mao Zedong, this is what they all did, work and do what the party says, or we will shoot you. And so a lot of people got killed. They tried for as long as they could to be slaving in the mines and the railways and all that and the farm fields. But after a while, no more incentive. I'd rather just take a bullet. That's how bad. People were voluntarily lining up to get shot. So there's your system in action. A study of the infiltration methods of the Fabians shows that they had nothing to learn from the Marxists about this art. Karl Marx's great collaborator Engels wrote of the Fabians as follows in 1893, quote, their tactics are to fight the liberals, not as derided opponents, but to drive them on to socialistic consequences, therefore to trick them. Did you hear that the liberals were the target? And that liberal, that word used to exist separate from what it means today, which is usually a socialist, right? A Marxist, a totalitarian lover, right? That's the modern liberal. The classical liberal was just about having small government. It was a totally different view. Many of the people critiquing communism were classic liberals. Many of the people critiquing many of your founding fathers of America were classic liberals, right? Or had that tinge, because that all came out of the Enlightenment. And so they looked at the liberals as targets because the liberal of that age was like a new child. It's like Path of the Fool in the tarot. It's like, I'm off to go and create an amazing new world, right? Where freedom and liberty will rule for all and we'll have equality under the law, not equality amongst human beings. That can't exist. Equality under the law, equality of value, right? And they became the target because they were so naive and open-minded that they were open for attack and suggestion. And they were looked at as the target. And that's what the target was. And they're literally saying, here's Engels saying the tactics of the Fabians was to fight the liberals and get in and basically trick them and bring them into the fold. Now, the facade of respectability. This is a big part when we're talking about Fabians here, okay? Results demonstrated that the Fabians had more realistically assessed the techniques necessary for infiltration and subversion in Britain than had the Marxists. Although, as we shall see shortly, the Marxists must have delighted with the impact of the Fabians on the British middle and upper classes. Yeah, because they were a hard one to grab. The lower classes and the poor classes chomped down communism and Marxism like Cheerios, okay? But the middle and upper classes in like Germany, Austria, Russia, US, they didn't want nothing to do with that. They're like, that's for the poors. So they needed to concoct something that would be a little more appetizing to the middle and upper classes. And this is what the achievement in Germany was that they had finally figured out the best way to pull the middle and upper classes into the centralized government scheme. So Bernard Shaw and the other Fabian leaders carefully presented the Fabian society as a highly respectable society, thus making it possible, as Shaw said, for an ordinary, respectable religious citizen to profess socialism and belong to a socialist society without any suspicion of lawlessness. Because we do know that there was a lot of lawlessness in the socialist movements prior. So he had to say, well, no, we have respectable, positive bloodlines that come from very elite societies and orders that will be a part of our order. And now there's no public doubting or any mud being thrown at them because they're looked at as being respectable citizens that just have a very noble, altruistic view of how the society should be run. It's very, very simple to do. And in his reminiscences, the socialist leader Heidemann wrote about, quote, the bureaucratic Fabian society, which so assiduously promulgated the doctrine of middle-class permeation and high-toned intrigue. So it was the Fabians that actually gave the system to the Nazis, essentially. Like they gave the recipe, and then the Nazis kind of did their own little thing to it, and then others have tried it, and then now here we are, fast forwarding to the WEF and the UN and all that, and they're still using the Fabian system. Here, I'll make this a little bigger, small print. Perhaps one of the most revealing statements to be found in any of Bernard Shaw's political writings is on page 185 of Intelligent Women's Guide to Socialism and Capitalism, because that's when he was trying to talk the women into this. This statement exposes the widespread myth that the leadership of the socialist movement has been provided by the manual workers or the have-not members of society. So basically the average Joe Sixpack. Shaw wrote, quote, now the significant thing about the particular socialist society which I joined was that members all belonged to the middle class. That is, they were either professional men like myself or members of the upper division of the civil service. To their conservative and liberal parents and aunts and uncles 50 years ago, it seemed an amazing, shocking, unheard of thing that they should become socialists. So just telling you right there, he's telling you prior liberal and conservative groups would have been despising socialism prior to this, okay? Not like that is, that's why today, neither group is despising socialism. They're all adopting Fabian socialist policies into their parties. But once upon a time, it was much more pure until this happened. Really, he continues, it was quite natural and inevitable. Karl Marx was not just a poor laborer, he was the highly educated son of a rich Jewish lawyer. His almost equally famous colleague, Friedrich Engels, was also a well to do employer. It was precisely because they were liberally educated and brought up to think about how things are done instead of merely drudging at the manual labor of doing them that these two men, like my colleagues in the Fabian Society, note please that we gave our society a name that could have occurred only to a classically educated man, because most people had no idea what Fabian meant, were the first to see that capitalism was reducing their own class to the condition of a proletariat, meaning the capitalism was actually bringing the rich, the super wealthy down a notch, contrary to what the Marxists will bleat at you. They were the first to see that capitalism was reducing their own class to the condition of a proletariat, and that the only chance of securing anything more than a slave share in the national income for anyone but the biggest capitalists or the cleverest professional or businessmen lay in a combination of all the proletarians, without distinction or class or country, to put an end to capitalism by developing the communistic side of our civilization until communism became the dominant principle in society and mere owning, profiteering, and genteel idling were disabled and discredited. So that's the quote from what's his name here? I gotta rewind it. Oh, this is from Shaw. That is from Shaw. That's from Bernard Shaw. The Fabian concept of an elite of specialists, managers, and administrators to dominate and plan society not only appealed to many members of the middle class, but it also attracted some of those from the upper class and even the aristocracy, who, having lost their former elite standing, looked at the quote, respectable Fabian proposals as a means of regaining some of their lost influence. This is key because this same thing happened with these Illuminist groups in the 1700s. And it's the idea that obviously a lot of them didn't want to be associated with some secret society, but at the same time, they were losing their power. And they realized that the members of some of these Illuminati groups, and there were many names, there were different ones, right? Um, they carried with them this air of kind of like the Fabians, this air of aristocracy and high class. And these were all professionals. This wasn't some lowbrow thing. This wasn't just the working man. This was like, it had that air of respectability that would have attracted some of the elite guys, right? So that's an important part. Let's move on here. Now we get into this liaison with Marxist Leninists. He continues, but behind the facade of respectability, the leading Fabians were quite willing to maintain both a personal and philosophical liaison with their fellow socialists, the Marxist Leninists. Although even a number of the Marxists could not bring themselves to accept Lenin's revolutionary program, the Fabians were willing to in 1907 to help Lenin and his Bolshevik supporters to meet in London after they had been driven out of Copenhagen, Denmark. It was during the 1907 Bolshevik conference in London that Joseph Fils, a wealthy American soap manufacturer and a Fabian socialist, because they had them all over the place, helped the delegates with a substantial loan. Lenin and Trotsky, who had both attended the 1907 Bolshevik conference, repaid Phil's loan through the Soviet government in 1921. So these are some of the guys bankrolling the communists. And of course, you have the ones that Professor Sutton will tell you about as well. Now, Lenin was directly associated with the Fabians as far back as 1897 when he translated Sidney Webb's History of Trade Unionism. Lenin recommended this book to his fellow Marxists. A close study of Lenin's book, Imperialism, leaves no doubt that the Bolshevik leader drew heavily upon the book of the same name written by J.A. Hobson, the well-known Fabian leader. A classic example of how the Fabians have always been willing to serve the communists was the report on Soviet Russia given by Sidney and Beatrice Webb after their 1931 visit to the Soviet. The warm Soviet welcome in Moscow prompted the Webbs to observe that we seem to be a new type of royalty, quote. But the top Marxist-Leninists knew what they were about. Now, upon their return home, the Webbs issued their famous 2-volume report, Soviet Communism, A New Civilization. This work had far-reaching effects in the English-speaking world because it was presented as a typical unbiased Fabian work, written by solid, respectable British citizens. With their usual wealth of detail, the Webbs created the impression that they had undertaken a massive piece of thorough, honest documentation. But the work was a Fabian communist deception. While many critics of the Webb's report did attempt to expose the false claims that were made and to show it as pro-communist propaganda, it was not until April 7, 1952, that a former high official of the Soviet Foreign Affairs Office, Igor Boglapov, testifying before the United States Senate Subcommittee on Internal Security, was able to reveal the truth about what had happened. Boglapov said that he had helped prepare the material for Soviet communism in the Soviet Foreign Office. All that the Webbs had to do was, quote, to remake a little bit criticizing, but in its general trend, the bulk of the material was prepared for them in the Soviet Foreign Office. It's all the same club. That's my final one. The student of true history, which is not a series of disconnected episodes, but a flow of policies stemming from philosophies, knows that, and actually, I love that. I'm going to do that again. I've been saying this a bit. When we talk about the origins of parliament systems, laws, courts, the building blocks of any society or civilization, they all spring from ideas. They all have a premise. They all have an origin. And very few people go back to look at the origin of where this came from. This came out of the philosophical tradition and the theological tradition. There was debate that hacked out all these ideas. And you had these different philosophers and thinkers and theologians or scholars that sort of had they adopted a particular argument and then went at it with others. And you got at least this discussion that started to be happening in our civilization that eventually forged ideas that then later became, this is how we're going to set up our government. This is the type of citizen we want. These are the freedoms they should have, and all of this is born. But it came out of these debates and discussions that go back to Plato and before, that come from the rich philosophical tradition that today you're being told in school is dead. No, you don't need to study philosophy. It's dead. They were just all crazy. Look, Nietzsche went crazy. They all went crazy. They're just thinking about thinking too much. It's all a bunch of bollocks. What matters is, can we build bridges? Can we build economies? Can we build countries? We don't need philosophy. And you go, wait a minute. And that's why you got to keep bringing it up, Ayn Rand's book, Philosophy, Who Needs It, where she goes through point by point all of the truisms that we say, all the little statements that we make on a daily basis here in the West, and then shows you which philosopher that idea came from, the origin of it. Well, I'm doing the same thing here. You guys are everybody's talking about all the isms and what are we going to do politically and socialism and versus Nazism and communism and all this stuff. Yeah, there's a tradition of argument and philosophy that birthed all that shit too. And so we're digging in. And what we're seeing isn't pretty. So the true student of history, which I hope is everybody listening, and history is not a series of disconnected episodes. It's not coincidence, but a flow of policies stemming from philosophies that you need to know about, knows that current events can only be realistically assessed against the background of past ideas and beliefs. That's why we got to keep digging up the past. Literature has been one of the principal media for the dissemination of ideas, which brings us to the special contribution of Shaw and Wells to the present plight of the world. Now, I left it there. That's the end of that chapter. I made good time on that, so that tells me I could probably do a little more for the next one. But now we're going to get into the history of Shaw and Wells and how eventually they took over their ideas seeped into the academic world, which was crucial, into the media, which was crucial, into the government. And if you talk about infiltration instead of invasion, we'll just come back here now. Then you have to understand what the premise or what the arguments were of the people that infiltrated our economies and infiltrated our societies. And it was their ideas that infiltrated. You don't even need the people. If you can have an idea, then it can catch fire. If it does catch fire, you can keep pushing that idea, and then the idea will bring about basically the opening for your guys to get in and then implement the idea. Now, what else was I thinking about on this? Um, what I probably want to do in the next one is keep going through, because the book just gets better and better. It's a 44-page booklet. Okay. So it's a very short read. So we're trying to go through it step by step, and we're going to get into the deep end of it. And then I want to do some comparing between the original premise of the Fabian Socialists, who were in league with the Communist International, which was all sparked out of these secret societies that we got into in the occult origins of totalitarianism. Okay. If you've been following, how does that relate to specific policies coming into the Canadian Parliament right now, coming into the UN, right? Like I'm looking right now at UNDRIP. Everybody heard of UNDRIP? Getting into all this land title stuff going on in BC and all over Canada. This is going to be extremely relevant. I'm going to be doing more on specifically that. I've been posting about it and talking about it. This is way bigger than just some Aboriginal tribes trying to claim land title. Those tribes believe they're just having their day right now, but they're also being used by these types of higher forces, because the whole point is to get rid of private property as an idea entirely. So when you know the end game, that they want to eradicate private property. I've got, you don't believe me? Come on, guys. You know me better than this. I come with receipts. Let me get it. I've been reading this quote. It's so good. Yeah. There he is. Yeah. So if I'm telling you, if you know the end game, you can rewind and see, hey, are we getting close to the end game? When you know where they want to take you, are we getting there? All you got to read, if you want to compare this, is read all this literature from the Fabian Socialists, which is what we're going through. Read the 12 planks of the Communist Manifesto and what they want to achieve, a central bank, all these different things, right? And then look at your society. Are we getting anywhere? Here's Arnold Toynbee, Professor Arnold Toynbee. He did this in 1931. He's got whole universities named after him, this guy. Okay. Here's what he said. He was a Fabian. We are at present working discreetly with all our might to wrest, spelled W-R-E-S-T, like wrestling, to wrest, to grab, to steal, to destroy. We are working presently with all our might to wrest this mysterious force called sovereignty out of the clutches of the local nation states of the world. Do you understand what that means? No sovereignty. Part of sovereignty comes private property. It's actually private property rights are the primary of freedom in a society. You must have the right to property. You must also be recognized as your own property. Your body must be belonging to you or to God or to nature, however you want to view it. But it's yours. Your body, your mind, your soul, your life is your property to guard. It's the property of your soul. In this argument, the state owns you. The real state, the deep state. Okay? You don't own you. You don't command your destiny. You don't think freely and behave freely in this world. You are a branch of our bigger tree. You are us. We tell you. So you can't have private property. And you don't own your body. Pfizer owns your body. Right? These private companies own your body. Your government owns your body because they can direct your body and say, we don't like what you're doing with your body, so we're putting your body in prison. Now, you need to have law and order in a society. You can't actually have freedom without law and order, okay? But the laws need to be about protecting your freedom, protecting your body, protecting your mind, protecting your private property rights. That's what law and order was mandated to do under the Western premise, not the Fabian socialist premise that is now smuggled in since the 30s and is now presented as, well, the result of all these policies that have been getting trickled into your governments for hundreds of years, for 100 years. You can't equate that to a free market, a true free system. It's freedom, but it's like what did they say? Halfway to Moscow, halfway to communism. We'll get them halfway, and then we'll go all the way. In fact, history tells us there's no choice but to go all the way once you go halfway. You can't turn back. So this then gets you into philosophy, because now you got to start asking yourself, how do you combat the notion that they're telling you freedom is a myth? Freedom doesn't exist. You know why they're going to tell you? These Fabians working in your universities, highly financed celebrity figures out there arguing these exact points right now, influencing your children. They're going to tell you, you as a living being do not possess free will. Is that a legal position? Is that a constitutional position? Is that a um, some sort of practical system or what? No, that's a philosophy. That's a philosophical idea. That's a belief. There's a philosophical school called fatalism or determinism that believes humans are not possessors of will. They don't possess free will. They are controlled like robots by genetics and all these other antecedent forces, as they say. So I'm just giving you, I've been harping on that for years. I disagree with them, obviously. Otherwise, I wouldn't be a freedom advocate, because freedom, if you're going to say you're going to have freedom, yeah, we do mean, when we talk usually about freedom in these circles, we're talking about political ideas of freedom. Like what level of control does the government have over you? That's usually when we're talking freedom, what we're talking about. But when you realize that that definitely relates to the deeper discussion about freedom that comes from philosophy and theology, now you can see how the philosophies influence the political policies. And when you understand that it was philosophies that influenced political policies, all you got to do is trace the origin of those philosophies and the thinkers that thought them, and not just the thinkers that thought them, because it's not always, you can't always blame the Hegels, the Schellings, the Blakes, all these different philosophers, or even the Marx, right? It's how do those philosophies get then rescripted, translated, and then installed in the political public square, that where we can have a concern now, right? Because I'm not against having open forum for philosophy and thinkers, and you need the philosophers to embody their ideas and advocate and argue their ideas, right? Almost to like an extreme level, so that you can see the full idea. And then you can have others critique it, right? That's a free society. A free society is about having discussion and debate and presenting and cross-examining and allowing there to be a democratic process of anybody can be involved in that. Like you and me, I'm sitting here. I'm not sitting in government. I'm not a part of any societies. I'm a dad. I work from home. I have a dojo. I do a podcast. That's it. I'm an independent person. But I have and you listening right now, whatever your background is, you have the ability to read and write. A lot of the people in this era didn't. So we've always been sort of dominated by this intelligentsia and assumed that they were all just moral and amazing people that were always just there to help make everybody's life better, only to find out, well, yeah, but there's also the power Game of Thrones going on in the background. So a lot of this is smoke and mirrors. So when you have access to this information as an average person, and you can go and read the different philosophies that all these ideas came from that created civilization, and then look at the experiments that have been done since the founding of Western civilization, or any, you could take it to any civilization if you want, and then look at where it started versus where we are. Now you can find out which philosophical ideas actually had something to contribute and which actually have been leading us more towards tyranny and away from freedom, away from reason as well. This is the other critique of these systems, is that you lose reason. You also, when you create an equitable world, you eliminate genius, because you can't have anybody that's smarter than anybody else in any subject. You have to keep leveling. That's why they call the levelers in France in the Jacobin revolutions, right? The levelers, they level the playing field. That's what the communists are. That's what the Fabian socialists are. That's what all totalitarians are. Because that's the song, that's the bird song that pulls it out of you as a human. Yeah, I really want to, everybody, yay, kumbaya, let's do it. But you forget that in practical reality, nature doesn't do that. Nature does not create things equally. It's in an equal proportion at the base, meaning maybe you could get into the Fibonacci or the golden mean ratio and the measurements and the numbers and the system. And it's like, wow, we live in like basically a big giant Swiss watch where it's all just perfect mathematics, right? There's that level. There's, maybe you could say, the soul level of, we all come from photonic light energy or whatever, whatever the soul is. You could say, yeah, that's the oneness that you could say humanity shares. But when it filters into matter, when it filters into the living, breathing human beings, nature builds things different from other things. I've said this before. You see a forest of a particular kind of tree, and you go, hey, there's a bunch of trees. See, there's collectivism right there. See, nature builds everything in collectivism. We've got zebras. That's one group of animal. We got lions, right? We got pine cones. We got beetles. We got ladybugs. We got hummingbirds. So there's a bunch of so already nature's creating a bunch of categories of different expressions of life. But that's where everybody stops, on the surface level, and they go, look, like is like. Birds of a feather flock together. Sure. But if you go a little deeper with your microscope, you don't even need a microscope. You just look a little deeper, you're going to find out every single pine cone is just a little different. Mathematical ratio, same basic laws at the base, same, but different. Every pine tree, every rose bush, every garden, it changes even by seasons, right? So every human being, yes, the type of a being called a human, Homo sapien sapien, right? There's the category that's different than, say, chimpanzee or alligator. But what's interesting about the human being as opposed to other animals in nature is we are unique even amongst all the differences in nature, because we possess this high level of consciousness and awareness of our situation, awareness to a different degree. We can think about thinking, we can analyze thinking, we can sit here and we can create. There's just a different gear in the human consciousness that is endless. And as many humans as you can get into a room, you're going to have, you could have a room of, like, I don't know, white straight males all sitting in one room. Okay, they're all part of the same human race, they're part of the same sex, and they're part of the same race. Okay, there's some sameness there. How do we get equality through that? How do we get, all that equality? We go, yeah, but even amongst that group of all these straight white males in the same room, there's going to be so many differences between them physically, biologically, health-wise, genetics. Some guys are going to be good at sports. Some guys are going to be shit at sports. Some guys are going to be taller. Some guys are going to be shorter. Some guys are going to be skinnier. Some guys are going to be fatter. Some guys are going to be, living until they're 60. Some guys are going to go to like 112. And that's just the physical. Then you get into the consciousness, the epigenetics, the consciousness, the thoughts in their head. They think differently. You could have 12 different guys, white straight males, sitting in a room and pick any type, right? They're all going to be more different than they are the same on so many different things. And then they're going to have some things where they unite on. So just a quick little segue on thinking about this. Again, I'm giving you this. These are the arguments. These are the foundations of the arguments that took place in the philosophy world, because they're arguing about the nature of reality before it even boils down into a political philosophy about how we govern economics or property rights. So you got to know the argument. And you got to know that there was a school that separated from the school of people who believed in freedom as being essential to the soul of man, being the base of it. If you get into Schelling or some of these guys, freedom is the ground of your being, they would say. Freedom is the origin point. Freedom is that spark of God within you, the spark of nature, the spark of creation, the spark of spirit itself is free. They even believe that the soul became free when it left the body. Others, the Hermetics, said no, the soul was freed from a different prison by manifesting itself in the carnal world. Different ways of seeing it. Either way, the debates about freedom started with, do you have free will? Can you make up your own decisions? Can your mind be changed? Can, all these different things. Can you change the trajectory of your life, or is it purely fated? Is it fate? Is it fate? Is it the gods? Is it the zodiac signs? Is it your genetics? It seems like through history, as much as humanity has dreamt and written about freedom, there's also been those who have dreamt and written about the antithesis of freedom. And that could really make things simple when you're analyzing this. The people that want and crave temporal power, that is a natural extension of the belief, the premise that there's a few premises baked in there that humans do not possess free will, that there is no higher authority like natural law, spirit, God, however you want to view that sort of noumenal other layer of reality, right? And then there's the people and so that's their premise, is they say, no, there is no free will, there is no freedom. Nature does not build things uniquely. It builds categories. It builds collectivism. That's what they see through their minds. But what if their mind is also traumatized? This brings in the psychology now. That's why we do this so much on the Unslaved podcast. This brings in all the psychoanalysts, the psychologists, the Erich Fromm, the Jungs, the Freuds, Horney, these different thinkers. And you got to go, okay, it's super complicated, isn't it? And then you go back to the base principles from the Hermetic schools and you go, okay, well, maybe there's a little bit of both. Maybe there are some things determined by what you could call natural law, or the laws governing the forces of nature. Maybe there is a determined aspect to that. It's like rules of the game. Yet there is also things that are mutable. There are also things that can be changed. There's the whole alchemical process. It's not about any physical lead to gold. The original alchemy was about an internal spiritual process. Turning water into wine. Your body's mostly made up of water. You're turning it into something different, right? These are all metaphors. These are all little allusions to these old ways of thinking, and how ancient man came up with these ideas that these guys are all arguing about. And so you got to understand the power, the totalitarian psychology, the psychology of a totalitarian, whatever brand they're putting on you. There's a reason they are that. You can even meet totalitarians that aren't trying to run your government. They're just trying to run your life as a person. Like in your own personal life, you'll meet the same psychological, philosophical premise type person that believes they have the right over your existence and are constantly acting like an authoritarian towards you. So you have examples in your own personal life of people that are in that sort of frequency. And then you just got to blow that up a little bigger, and you're going to get to your Illuminists, and you're going to get to your Fabians and your communists and your fascists and the totalists, right? You're going to understand how they tick. And you're going to understand that a lot of it has to do with their worldview. The way you view the world is going to be an extension of the way you view yourself. It's going to always start with the view of yourself first. It starts there. That's the baseline. How do you view yourself? Do you possess a hatred towards yourself in any way? That will influence what philosophical premise you accept and believe in. If you possess any level of a hatred or a despising of who you are and what nature gave you, your body, your mind, you're riddled with self doubt and all this kind of stuff, or self loathing. It's going to build a resentful attitude in you. This was known by all the great sages and the healers. They would know. Oh, they would look for it. If you start sitting there, if the vast majority you're sitting on the therapy couch or you're talking to the shaman, and the vast majority of the words coming out of your mouth are all about all the other people and how they've ripped you off and all the things they'll sit there taking notes and go, okay, let's get through all the resentment, all the victim status. And the true healer was to try to bring you out of victim status into victor status, where you now command your own mind again. And you're not riddled with the self hate that then spews into the resentment and the envy towards others that have the things you wish you had, but are secretly stopping yourself from having because of the self-hate, not because of the other person. And that is the premise and the origin of the notion behind freedom that says with freedom comes responsibility. It's not just responsibility to tend your garden. It's not just responsibility to, I don't know, contribute to society. It's your responsibility to make sure that you don't let your mind fall prey to those demons. That's your responsibility. Because if you don't, those mental demons will take over your mind of resentment, envy, victim status, all born not from what other people are doing, but what you either did to yourself or never gave yourself. You're in a sort of personal impoverishment situation. That's the real source. That type of person swims willingly towards the shark tank that these Fabians are laying out for you. These Fabians are those people. These totalists are those people, just to a much higher degree. These people have gone to a point where behind the lodge doors, they're doing rituals to ensure that you become that psychological type so that you can be an effective agent in the army to do the bidding of the cult. So when we say with great power comes great responsibility, and everybody kind of rolls their eyes because they're just sick of hearing the Spider-Man line, or we talk about how in order to preserve civilization, we need to get into some psychology, some philosophy, some history, and nobody wants to do that research, and they want to stay on the political level only. Now you know why. We got to get past the political level. The political level was basically concocted so that you wouldn't look at the deeper levels and figure this shit out. The political level can be changed, but it can't be changed within the political level itself. It has to be changed at the premise, at the base, at the foundation. That's why there was a battle of ideas. That's why you need free speech in a society, so that someone can come and challenge your resentment and your envy and your self-hate and your projection, your psychological projection, and your false premises that you're trying to bake into new government policies that will further enslave your country. We need to have debate about these things. Our civilization was born out of a tradition of these discussions. And what these people wanted to do was say, guys, we intelligentsia have already had all the debates to be had ever for all of time. We've already worked it all out. You don't need to trouble your little head with any of these trivialities and ancient philosophies and thinking and how things, you don't worry about that. You just go and pay your damn taxes, work your butt in the field, and beware there's many penalties if you don't. And we, the enlightened ones, will rule the world. And you'll just be a worker ant in it, and you'll be content with that. And if you want those kind of people to run your society, all you got to do is look at all the examples of when they do run the society and do get control of the levers of power, what they do when they get in. See, you got to remember, at the base of this war against freedom is a war against reality. When you got that, it's so easy to spot this. The war against reality is based in self-deception. So it's no wonder these guys lie as a way of a modus operandi. They're liars, they're cheaters, they're thieves, they're murderers, they're enslavers. But they're doing all that for your own good, don't you see? That's how they operate. And they operate like that because they're at war with nature. They don't like what nature has bestowed to them. They don't see it as a gift. They don't see the body as a gift. They see it as a prison. They don't see freedom that has been endowed by nature or your creator or whatever forces make all this shit run. They don't see that as a beautiful thing that, yes, comes with challenges, but that is to be embraced because of the massive benefits that it accrues you. They don't want any of that. They're at war with nature. They're at war with reality, which is why all of their arguments butt up against reality. And that's why people like us who are sitting here going, what did they just institute? What are they talking about? Am I on a different planet? Like, what are we doing? We're transitioning 9-year-olds and 13-year-olds to be like, what are we're putting them on drugs? Pharma is going to have them as a client for the rest of their lives because of what? What? What's happening? People are like, what's going on? We're paying this much in taxes to change the weather? What? It doesn't make any sense because we're not dealing with people who are living in reality. And they're willing, see, these kinds of people, these types of infiltrate are willing to lie because lying is like breathing for them. Actually, lying is survival for them. Because if they tell themselves the truth for 1 second, do you realize the entire house of cards of their psyche is going to collapse? They know it. You can't tell liars the truth. It's like showing a crucifix to a Dracula, right? So if you want to know why your puppet politicians and fake journalists and academics with quotes are lying through their teeth about history, they're lying to your children when they're teaching them. They're not showing them the whole story. They're either lying overtly or they're lying by omission. Have you heard of that? Lying by omission? That's amazing Fabian technique. It's been working for centuries. You lie by omission. It's the best way to lie if you think about it. Because if you say a lie outright, you might forget it. But if you just remember to forget the truth, you can lie by omission every day of the week. That's why when you ask politicians direct questions today in Canada, they'll just never answer. Like, I'll never forget all the questions they put up to Trudeau back in the day and how many times that guy was like a ninja at just never answering the question. And you see them from all these guys. So it's for them, it's lie by omission. That's the best way. Then you don't have to remember anything. You can actually just forget things, which is easier for the human mind to do. It's easier to forget than it is to remember. So it's a general rule of how they operate. So if you want to know why you got a bunch of liars and criminals running your show, they are, as every individual involved, even though they are collectivists and they are part of these societies, they are part of these round tables, they all wear the rainbow pin or whatever, the circle from the UN, or they've got other secret clubs they're a part of, nocturnal clubs. The reason they can lie is because as individuals, they have lied to themselves somewhere along the way about reality. Because you got to lie to yourself about the law of reality and the law of nature if you're going to go along with these kind of ideologies. You have to lie to yourself. So if you've lied to yourself and you keep stacking self-lie upon self-lie upon self-lie, now you know what creates these types of people. And then all they're going to do is just keep telling you, and they can very convincingly lie because they believe the lie, or at least maybe consciously believe the lie, but subconsciously they're always going to know. I believe your conscience, your little Jiminy Cricket that we all have, that's something that you can never shut off. Your best way of trying is all the drugs and alcohol and all the distractions, which is what you see with these types of cultists. You see debauchery. The more crazy the debauchery, the more insane the rituals, the more insane the part. I mean, just watch Wolf of Wall Street. It just gives you a kind of a vision of a young, bright man who gets totally twisted into this creature, right? Uh, it's that kind of process of self-deception that breeds external deception. And you wouldn't know about this little war going on in the human psyche unless you'd studied the philosophies and the histories, because that's where that battleground was. That's what philosophy was. That's what theology was. It was the battleground of human ideas. Are we living in truth, fact, and reality, or are we living in magical child thinking, distortion of the facts, psychological projection of trauma and resentment, fake causes so that we can hide the real cause of our distress, which is internal, psychological, not what's going on with one group over there, or that guy did this to me, living in victim consciousness. So there's thinkers in history and in this tradition that are trying to inspire humanity to become heroic and victorious, which means you have to align with the facts. You have to align with the truth if you're going to be, because the truth empowers you to be heroic. You can't have a hero that's engaged in a lie. Tell me a myth where the lie was what made the hero the hero. The hero needs the truth. The hero is the one that sees it. He sees the lie in the antagonist, in the anti-hero. In fact, all the villains, they're always the best villains are presented in a way where for a while you agree with them. They're kind of like, Loki makes some good points, right? Kaiser Sose made some good points. Mao Zedong made some good points. Darth Vader made some good points. Do you ever see how in the story that they almost make like, oh man, that's a good point. How am I going to deal with that? And in the myth, the hero is always, he's never just grappling with the physicality of the enemy, of the villain, of the fight, the physical lightsaber battle. He's dealing with the verbal jujitsu. The two kung fu masters sit over tea and they have a debate. That's their sparring match. They spar intellectually first, and then they put their napkins aside, they put their teaspoons down, and they get up and they do some kung fu and they test out their physicality. That was a way that they would deal with this in the warrior tradition. They'd go, okay, let's do debate first and then combat after, and just see. I just wanted to see what kind of a man you are. Imagine we did this in politics. Imagine we go to parliament and you could have like a physical trial by combat to see if you're the measure of a man to get into parliament, or if you're just this little wet noodle that's going to get pushed over by all these forces in the background. It'd be interesting. But at the very least, we could do real debate instead of what do you see? What do you see in Canada right now? They're shutting down debate. They don't want debate. That's what censorship's all about. The censors coming in, the little do-gooders. Oh, we got to protect everybody's feelings. We can't have you guys having this adult discussion out in the open about complex ideas. And God forbid the good guy wins and we figure out a truth that we've never really wanted to accept. That will destroy everything we're trying to build with our Fabian New World Order. So we can't have open discussions now and allow average Joes making arguments that might persuade millions of people away from our little power grab scam grift that we've been working on for all this time. That's what it is. It's a scam. These people are scammers. They don't want, see, the unheroic person doesn't want to earn their way. They just want to take their way. They just want it. I just want things. I just want to take it from you. You have it. I want it. I'm going to take it by force. Oh, I can't. Then you find out these guys aren't strong enough to take it by force because they're all betas. So you got to take it by what? Hook and crook. That's another way to figure out who these people are. The little connivers, the Machiavellian, behind the scenes manipulate. And you know the type. You've met them. Imagine them working in your government and in your intelligence services and in your RCMP and in your colleges and universities, running your media, those types. Now imagine the roundtable system and the Fabian system and the communist system are just different doorways for the recruitment program for the real cats that know these are the primary psychopaths now. Their religion is power. They don't care how they get it. They don't really believe in any of the Kool-Aid stuff. They just use that to bring in their little orc army, okay, and breed them like lab rats, and then put them in the key positions. These are the guys that sit there and they sort and they go, okay, this person's promising because they have these qualities and they'll help us bring this aspect in. And then those guys have those qualities and blah, blah, blah. So there's that sort of managerial level that I think happens at the top as well, where they sort of manage. It's a human resource management department that looks at it and goes, right, this guy's for this position, this guy's for that position. You know, we know how they roll. So when you get to those questions where you're like, well, who's running this shit going on? Who's running this great reset takeover, this fourth industrial revolution or whatever they're calling it? Who's running this? After Klaus Schwab told us he penetrated the cabinets with his agents, right? Just like the Rhodes Network does. How do they run that? Well, they run it. They don't even need to pay people off. I'm sure they do. I'm just saying you don't even, if you go with the level I'm going to here with this and that this author was pointing at, you don't necessarily need to threaten people and you don't necessarily need to blackmail people, even though we know that is a part of how this whole criminal syndicate operates. If you can perfect the psychology level of simply just identifying the personality types you want, the right doctrine combination that can install a belief system in your little minion, then you can put them everywhere you want and they'll just do what they do. They are activists. They are believers. There's a lot of these believers that get pulled into this Club of Rome stuff and into this little network. And there's obviously a hierarchy within the network, right? Some of it's shadowy and mysterious. Some of it is documented and irrefutable. But what isn't to be refuted is the success of this. And the fact that exactly what they said they wanted to build, exactly the way that they said they were going to build this new world order, is exactly what your politicians are doing right now, absent maybe a few exceptions. Is that a coincidence? Is that a natural progression of history? Or is that being caused to happen for the purpose of causing it to happen? Which would implicate understanding that these tenets violate the law of the land. So they are illegal because they violate the very premise of the systems originally set up under your constitutions, your Magna Cartas, your parliamentary systems. Yes, they were set up and there was some loopholes that were definitely exploited, but I'm talking about the fact that if we go again with that Tolkien notion that all evil men can't create anything, they can only steal and warp the work of good men. The good men and women built something that was to facilitate a thriving individual that would then, because they realized there is no such thing as groups. This was the other thing. There's no such thing as groups. There's types, there's categories, generally, like I said, with nature. But the more you zoom in, especially when you're dealing with a human being, you're dealing with a free-thinking individual that could end up being a genius, inventor, thinker, world mover, right? If you don't allow free thought, free speech, free association, free access to information, you won't produce geniuses and thinkers, which means you won't progress. If you censor everything to protect feelings, which are just, it's not protecting feelings that they want. The high table is a psychopathic group of people that have no feelings. So they're not here. They don't give a fuck about how you feel. Like, clearly they can genocide whole peoples and just go to bed at night. No problem. Okay. So we're not talking about like people that are concerned really about protecting everybody's sentiments and feelings. That's a laugh. That's for the activist level. They feel all the shit. They're the ones like, we would protect everybody from ideas. How dare you have ideas? They're doing it right now. They just released this documentary in BC yesterday, which I just watched this morning. I'm going to do some more on this, about what I think is ultimately one of the Fabian entry points, one of these socialist weapons, which is to cause division in the society, and make the dominant culture feel guilty for being what they are, to lie to them to say that all of their success was accrued by criminal and evil acts, and that our country is guilty of mass genocide of children. And there's an association being made with that, not to go after anybody that may have actually been involved with such crimes in the past, which we could get to, but to basically tar and feather the entire population and the entire history of the country, to cause guilt and shame about something that no evidence has ever been presented for. So a documentary just came out to expose this and tell Canadians the story that nobody else is telling them about this issue. It's very controversial in the country. It's super volatile right now. And it's all happening in the environment where all of these Aboriginal tribes are making land title claims on private property. And that we're even at a point where American tribes are making land claims, Alaskan tribes are making land claims in Canada, to the point where all the land claims coming in are essentially claiming the entire country. I look at that and I go, this isn't being driven by just some First Nations tribes. This is being driven by the Fabian network that has a design. They don't they don't care about the natives. They don't care about the old stock Canadians. They don't care about any of the new immigrants. They don't care about any of you. This is all means to an end. This is all chess. As Sidney Webb, the founder, said, an ever extraordinary game of excitement of chess, of basically guiding the aspirations of humanity without their knowledge. They have no idea that their beliefs are installed for them. They have no idea. They think their beliefs are theirs. We will guide them, which is an infringement on your sovereignty, because you're not given informed consent. You have no idea this is happening. Right? So anyways, I'm bringing this up because I'm watching this film about this. It's called Making a Killing. You got to go watch it. It's on YouTube. I don't care where you are in the world. Just watch it. And within hours of this, they actually were able to play it at the BC legislature, because the group that did it is a new small little political party called One BC in British Columbia, and they played it in legislation against all the yelling and screaming and resisting by the other government agents there who didn't want it. They were able to play it, and then they released it publicly. You can watch it on YouTube. I just posted it on my X feed. And within hours, voices from Ottawa, from New Brunswick, from all over the country are calling for the movie to be pulled, to be censored. And you watch the film and you're like, it's just giving you another side of a story, and it's presenting evidence and arguments. It's a documentary. A documentary is going to take a position. It's going to give it to you. It's like a philosopher out there. How many philosophers were locked up and killed? How many thinkers were assassinated by the state or by a torch-bearing mob? Go back to the tribal days. How many free thinkers in those tribal communities were skinned alive and boiled for thinking outside of the group, just for asking some questions? Be like, hey, I got some questions here. You're making some claims. I just want to follow up and just kind of clear things up for me. And you're just saying like, okay, so you're saying I'm somehow responsible for genociding thousands of children and I have to pay reparations for the rest of my days? Can I get an audit of where my taxes are going already? Oh, it's already going towards these causes and has been my entire life. I just didn't even look into it. So is that Oh, no, it's not. Okay. So you're just sitting there trying to ask, okay, what do you want from me? The person that didn't do any evil to any children ever? In fact, my job is to go and teach children how to become warriors and heroes so they don't turn into the slime that's crawling into your parliament today. And I'm responsible. So you ask questions. What do? Censor it. Take it down. We don't want to hear it. That's not the act of people who want the truth. That's the act of cowards and tyrants and deceivers. The truth doesn't hide from anybody. If there's an error in a book or a statement or a podcast that I've had podcasts pulled down because people don't like it. Well, just don't watch the freaking podcast. If somebody has a problem with this documentary that comes out or the podcast I'm making right now, here's free will proven. You can move on and just close the video and go watch a different video. Done. Never watch it again. Just ignore it. Just be, oh, I don't want to watch it. There's a lot of shit I censor from my own mind in my life every single day. I don't have to spend time reading all the troll comments and taking people on. Sometimes I do it because it's good practice, but other the times I just don't read it. And if I do read an insult or something that's derogatory, I don't have to accept it as fact of reality. There's your free will. But see, they don't want you to know that. They'd rather say, because they don't believe in free will, they're telling you we have to censor everything. Do you see how that works? That's a philosophical premise right there. That's admitting who they are. They're too dumb to know that they're giving it up all the time. And they think you're too dumb to even notice it. So that's why they're so brazen. But you can't hide psychology to a trained observer. You can't hide it. You can't hide the body language. You can't hide the emotional flushing of your face when you're talking about a bunch of bullshit. You can't hide the things that a well-trained observer can notice when you're trying to lie. You ever watch that show Lie to Me? It was a good detective show where they kind of got into that, criminal psychologists. Yeah. You're not pulling wool over those people's eyes. But those people are so few in your society that they know they can get away with it. And then those people go, guys, let me teach you the techniques of reading how people behave when they're lying. You can spot lies. And let me teach you how to spot contradictions in philosophical arguments. And let me teach you how to observe history and where to get good source material on it, so you know you're on the straight and narrow. Let me teach you how to get FOIA requests going so you can get information declassified. Let me teach you how you can go and do cross research analysis in multiple ways on one point of data. Let me, these are the kind of people that are going to come out. And what happens to those people? They get censored. Who censors them? The people at war with reality. Because those people are pointing out the reality. And they don't want that because they're living a lie, and they also want you to live a lie with them. That's what the New World Order is. It's a lie, and they want you to live the lie with them. So that's why you got to be a truth warrior. You need a spine of a warrior to stand up to that lie because it's so big. It's so influential. All your friends are into it. They've already bought it hook, line, and sinker because they're not psychologically prepared to deal with that barrage of weaponized payload propaganda, mental softening, all these Fabian techniques we're talking about and studying. Nobody's up on this. Nobody knows how to put a defense mechanism. It'd be like sending your 13-year-old daughter who has no jiu-jitsu training into a competitive match against like Gordon Ryan, the best in the world in jiu-jitsu. Like it's not going to go well at all. It would be over in like 0.2 seconds. That's what your average person is up against when it comes to the system and the institutions that are lying to you. They're lying to you. Not in all times and places. Remember, you got to keep some truth going. In fact, you could probably wholly be telling the truth, and that little bit, that's the poison you got to watch out for. So we need discernment. If you want freedom, you need discernment. You need pattern recognition. You need to also make sure that remember, who's the observer of all this information? Your mind, right? So what condition is your mind in this war? What condition is your mind in? If the battleground is your mind, because that's what this battleground is, if this is an asymmetric war and the battleground is your mind and you are the target, your mind is the target, because there's idea competition going on. They want to install ideas into your mind so that you become their little Pinocchio, right? You memorize, repeat, and say all the right things instead of having your own mind constructed by your own efforts contributed to by genius minds who were authentic and real and connected to the facts of reality. So if you want to preserve freedom, you need to understand the enemy, the weapons that they use, how they've used them in the past, how they're using them now, see the patterns, learn to identify the liars. There's many ways you can do this. It's never going to be perfect, but it's an unfolding process. You do the best that you can and make it a study. That's what this podcast is. It's my study that I'm hoping to use as an inspiration for anybody watching to make it their study. And then they make it a study and they make it a study. Now we're thinking again. We're not just receiving information and then adapting to it. We're thinking things through, right? That's free society. We're allowed to have different opinions. That's a free society. Show me any cults where you're allowed to have different opinions of the other cult members. Those cults don't last too long. You need, what do they call it? Common thought. You know where they want equality. They want equality of thought, because equality of thought equals mind control, mass mind control, consensus trance. They want consensus trance. These control freaks that have penetrated your cabinets. So thank God we have people like Eric Butler, and we have people like the authors of this blue book we're going to be going through more. And we have people like Jeward Griffin and Michael Tsarian and all the people that ever asked you to think outside the box, and all the great philosophers and the traditions they came from. Thank God we still have just enough of our free society left that we can even still keep this conversation going. But let me tell you, I can speak from being in Canada. We are on a razor's edge where I might not be able to broadcast. Looking at the bills going through with the internet, right? I'm hoping it doesn't get to that, but we're close. I might not be able to operate my business because I'm living on stolen land. So that's how they're selling it. And they're going to be like, yeah, your home, everything you've been paying into. Don't get me started on this. You're seriously telling me, sorry, quick rant. I have to, can't resist. You're going to tell me that I blame the government for this, not some tribes. They're just doing their thing. The government allowed this to happen. They knowingly allowed this situation with this land title and this superior title thing. They allowed this to happen. There's activists in our government that are a part of this Fabian network that are using this as one of the ways to use this agenda. And it's not about helping tribes and forgiving the past and all this shit. They're telling you. This is how it's a good example, because this is how these people operate. If you live in British Columbia or anywhere where these title claims are going through, British Columbia right now is the only place where they're actually going through. The Supreme Court ruled in favor of a superior Indigenous title to any other title. So now everybody's private property is up in question. Everybody's ability to resell their private property is up in question, because do you think a bunch of investors want to come in and buy property that still has title claims, has competing title claims? So they're going to tell you, we just kind of had to do this to help with truth and reconciliation. We've been charging you, property owners, property taxes going back to the beginning. And so you've been paying property taxes under the belief system that you own the property, and we have been collecting on those property taxes this entire time. But now, turns out we were wrong, and that isn't Crown land anymore. It belongs to this tribe over here, or whatever it is, right? So do you see how they work? Like, they're liars, they're cheaters, they're thieves, and they're also users. They use people that probably believe in their cause, like these tribes. They have their old gripes, And they're using that not to, what do you think they're going to do? You think they're going to hand the entire country of Canada over to less than 3% of the Canadian population to be the new landlord? Like, where do you think this is going to go? That's not what's going to happen. They're leaving us all vulnerable so that way higher forces can come in and go, you know what, guys? All y'all going to get clipped. We're taking all your friggin' property and y'all have no titles. How about that? You'll own nothing and you'll be happy. The world state has come in and declared your land as their title. And now you're all fucked. Or we'll get Islam in here up to a certain level and they'll just be like, yeah, well, taking care of less than 3% of the population is no big deal. And we'll move in. Now it's just up for grabs, the highest bidder. They've opened up Canada with this, and it's going to get worse unless it gets turned around. They've opened us up for a particular kind of legal real estate property war that could literally it could finish us off. The legal precedent has been set. It's just that we're not quite understanding. It's like getting punched in the jaw and you didn't see the punch. Everybody's kind of stunned. They know they got punched. They don't realize there's a big combo of more punches coming. That's where we're at. That's how these mofos operate in many different ways. So I'm going to do more specifically on that. I might even get some of these people on to interview them about this specific issue in Canada, because I just want to know the truth. And that's what it really is an understanding of the truth. I'm fascinated about history. I wouldn't be surprised if there were abuses from the church or whatever, but I just think they've been grossly over exaggerated for the purpose of setting up basically a big giant grift machine that can also be used by even higher forces to grift the entire country. But, I'll save that for another one. But either way, my hackles are up and my alarm systems are up because I'm seeing the movement, this Fabian movement going through the grass, slow degradation, slow demoralization, slow destabilization, waves of crisis after crisis after crisis. And then they get a new normalization. This is part of the lab experiment. Now they change the lab environment to produce a new psychological type. That's what I see. That's what these people saw. And I'm reading you from the horse's mouth over all these shows. We're not just going to conspiracytheory.com or some Reddit thread to talk about this. I'm sourcing it to the people who did it, who said it, who built it, who designed it, the system that has penetrated your government and is the reason why you don't recognize your country anymore. And we're just getting started. This is boil the frog. We're not even at boil point yet. So now if we can spot it here at this juncture, and we can listen to the rhetoric of conservatives, liberals, NDPs, I don't give a shit. And let me know if you see it, if you become very familiar with the writings of these Fabians, these communists, these fascists, these Nazis, you get familiar with their writings. Listen to your politicians and tell me if you don't just go, holy shit, I'm listening to Mussolini every day. I'm listening to Che Guevara every day. I'm listening to Mao Zedong every day. I'm listening to George Bernard Shaw echoing my living room right now when my politician is speaking. I'm listening to the Fabian Society and the High Tables agents telling me what I need to do next and what's going to happen next. When you identify that, you have the playbook. The playbook is now known by you. And even though you might go, wow, that's a bit scary though, Dave, all this shit you're rolling out, man, that doesn't sound very hopeful. Well, here's the hope. Now you know. Now you're conscious. Now you see the hypnotist on the stage. You see the tricks. You see the magician on the stage. You see the trick. You see the wires. You see the smoke machines. You see the fakeness of it. And you can at least save your mind from this attack. And then if we can keep our shit together as individuals and think this through, there absolutely are solutions to every single one of these issues. There's solutions. These issues once upon a time didn't exist. And they came from non-existence into existence. So if the problem can go from non-existence to existence, can't the solution also? There's some more philosophy for you. So get into the origin, get into the philosophy, get into the geniuses, get into the writings of the enemies of freedom, learn how they think, get into the psychology, and the wool will not be pulled over your eyes anymore. And then you got to live your principles. They're living their principles of being a bunch of totalitarian dicks. You got to be the opposite. You got to live, what does Albert Camus say? You got to live so free. Every breath is an act of resistance and rebellion against the lie. You got to rebel against the lie. You're not going out and doing color revolutions the way they do. You're doing an internal psychological spiritual revolution for your consciousness, for the consciousness of your children, where you're teaching them the truth. That's the rebellion. Truth against the world. It's the slogan of Unslaved. I wish I could pronounce it in the Gaelic. It's pretty cool. But anyways, yeah, truth against the world. Truth is going to win. It always wins. Nature always wins. And we just want to see how much damage we're going to have to take before it wins. Let's hope it's not too much. But anyways, there you go. At least this will help. At least this study, I hope, is just helping. Sometimes it helps to confirm things you've always heard, but we've always heard things. I find a lot of times when I talk to people, even well-meaning people that are aware, they've heard the general description of how this whole system and network works. When you get into specifics with them, it's pretty shoddy. So over the years, I've gone from that state of just having more of a general to having more specific knowledge. And if you can develop specific knowledge about the names, the dates, the statements, the exact order of events, you have a level of jujitsu that nobody else does. Let me tell you. So that's why I do these shows, and we'll keep going through. There's more of this book I want to go through. And then, as I promised, we're going to continue to go through this blue book I have, because there's way more gems in there I want to explore with you. And I'm going to keep going through my library, pulling books off the shelf, adding books to it, looking at this from different angles, because if you're going to fix a problem, you have to know that problem inside out, upside down, and backwards. And that's what our goal is. So I hope that helped for you guys. I hope you got something out of this today. Please help me out. Please share these shows if you find value in them. Please check out my Substack. If you want to support me, you can support me there, but I'm also supporting your research over there. I've got a massive archive of premium presentations on various subjects that I've done deep dives on. As a little thank you to anybody that wants to support my work for a few bucks a month, you can hit me on Substack. But I also do a lot of stuff just for free. And so if you want to support me there, just share it. That's all I can do. And I hope it adds some value. And stay tuned, guys. We've got a lot more coming. I got a lot more research to share with you. Keep your head on a swivel, and